Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of the ACP-620 study session. My name's Alex. I got my buddy Rodney here, and a special shout out to Revyz for making this episode possible. Today, we're going to continue with our exploration, and we're just going to keep on going where we left off, which is we're in the middle of doing the free Atlassian badging slash, I don't even know what you want to call it, but it's an official course that Atlassian puts out that is supposed to accompany and kind of help support the your study efforts for ACP-620. So we highly recommend you go through it as well, just to kind of go through it. And I think the biggest one, and we mentioned this one in an episode or two ago, Rodney, which is you do not want to arrive to the test center and seeing the questions, that the Atlassian style of questions for the first time there.
No.
You want to go through practice exercise like these so that you're not blindsided when you get there.
Atlassian has a particular style to their questions, and once you master it, these exams become a lot easier. But getting to that point is the hard part.
Yeah, the personal goal: getting through this entire lesson in this chat or in this video. We all know those get a little bit harder. All right, so topic today, mapping business requirements to Jira configurations. So by the end of the lesson, you're going to be able to discover business requirements in your organization, ask stakeholders the right question, and then map those requirements to Jira configs. So make sure that Jira meets the needs of your users. Before you start configuring Jira, it's important to directly involve your teams. That way, Jira will meet your users' needs and match how they complete work. You know what's interesting about this, Rodney? And here we go on the very first tangent, only a minute and 59 seconds into this.
I think that might be a record for us.
So here's what I don't get, right? So Atlassian, we obviously have an ACP-620 that is, there's a way to build a project in Jira, right? You shouldn't just jump into Jira and start creating projects, right? Like they're basically saying, take a little time out, figure out the craft here. There's an art to creating a project. Would you agree?
Yep.
Right? And then they slap us with the team managed project that basically says anybody in the company can create a Jira project. Knock your socks off. Have at it. No respect for the craft. I don't get how we can have both.
The way I've always thought about team managed projects is if your company is 5 people total, cough cough, Jira life, it's great because you're not likely to have a Jira admin who knows how to go through the process of taking your business requirements and turning it into a project. If you're over about 50 people, that's when things really start to get serious. I mean, they've been serious for a while at that point, but that's when you really need to buckle down on your processes and get someone who's able to do this kind of work. And you need to start moving away from those team managed projects.
Right. But Atlassian pushes and markets those team managed projects quite heavily. Like even in Jira Product Discovery, I was having a conversation with the Jira bro on LinkedIn the other day, and I was like, I don't like team managed projects, and he's like, well, don't use them. I'm like, well, you have to in Jira Product Discovery, and he's like, why is that? I'm like, because there's no other option. Right. And so there's some nuances to, I think there's some conflicts here, but let's stick to company managed. Well, what I will tell you is that these rules apply to both team and company. My argument is when you're creating a company managed project, because you have to have an extra level of privilege, ideally, you're most likely going to be interested in the ACPs. You're most likely going to be interested in taking the job of a Jira admin more serious. Versus when you're creating a team managed project, since by default, those are open to anyone and everyone, you might not understand the cause and effect of creating a project. And since you can just click through and do whatever you want, this is where I'm like, I'm saying that it kind of contradicts itself, right? Because build it right the first time. How many team managed projects have you seen that are just like, we just created a project, we had no idea what we were doing? So that first bullet.
Again, you said it. This is the craft to being a Jira admin. And most companies said team managed is for those companies who don't have a Jira admin. Fully appreciate that. Becoming a Jira admin, I mean, Mike said it best. It's like running into a cliff. Some people are skilled enough to climb the cliff and learn and become the Neo in the Matrix.
Yeah. All right. The other Rodney says he always turns off the global permissions that allow team managed project creation. So kudos to that, folks. If you're not doing that, I highly recommend it. Because again, if you don't do that, you will end up with a mess. And you don't want a mess. All right. It reduces feature overhead, design it well so people want to use it. I think this is key. Help people get their work done quickly and effectively. We recommend implementing Jira in 3 steps. Discover and understand business requirements, map requirements to Jira configurations, and implement in Jira. I would add a 4th step, Rodney, and I would say you follow these 3 steps, and then you rinse and repeat again. Because what I often find is that people have an idea of what they want from Jira, but it's not until they go into Jira and they start using Jira that then they realize that their idea and reality are 2 very different things. And so I typically do a first round of like wishful, here's what I would think I want. I build it for them, and then we come in with the harsh reality of like life's a little bit different. Let's actually get down to what you actually need.
Sylvia brings up a good point here. She says we do have Jira admins, but we also have end users who would not accept us to block team managed projects. So you have end users with control issues. We all do. The point there, and this is part of the craft and art of being a Jira admin, is you got to show them why you could do so much better job than they can, because you do know the system and you know the consequences, and the consequences are where we win 9 times out of 10, because there are very real consequences to designing your project wrong.
There's and I think end users traditionally, right? Like when you're left at, I'll back up a little bit more. I hate ClickUp for this particular reason, right? I think when tools give you too much power, which this is basically what a team managed project is, there's too much ability to really mess things up. A mess up is a strong word, right? But for example, like if anybody can create a project, a team managed project, then whatever need that they have, they're going to go and create a project. And unfortunately, because a lot of folks have a misconception of what a project is in Jira, I've seen way too many team managed projects that are for a specific release, that are for a specific sprint. Like I've seen sprint 1, like a project for just 1 sprint. And then there's another project for a second sprint. And I'm like, folks that are just have the ability to create projects at will don't always understand and appreciate the craft that is Jira. And so I just turned it off. I don't care.
The best answer, especially if you're migrating to the cloud, is never let your teams discover the team managed projects exist.
That's a very good point. Very good point. Because in data center and on-prem, you don't have that.
Yeah. So if you're doing a cloud migration, that is your best bet. For some people, that ship has already sailed. Fair enough. You got to show them why letting you manage their project is more beneficial to them than letting them have their free will.
Yeah, I would also say talk with your leadership, because a lot of like CTOs and like executive leaders bring me into Jira because they're usually very frustrated with where their Jira has gone. And usually the biggest culprit that I go and find, because folks and companies and enterprises, large organizations, and large is a
relative term.
Yeah, relative term. I would say anybody over 100 people, right? They want consistency. Like it is very, very, very hard to do work when your team speaks 20 different languages. And if every team is able to create their own Jira projects, then you're going to have 20 different variants of how to do work. And it's really hard to run a business like that. So this is why these company managed projects and having a good Jira admin really come into play. So I would say, like, if you're struggling with convincing your end users, I would talk to your leadership team, because the solution you can give them is consistency, governance, right? A playbook to operating Jira cohesively, as opposed to whatever the heck you got going on. Because I cannot imagine a team that just has all team managed projects have any consistency in their processes.
I mean, I've dealt with those people who are convinced they know better than the Jira admin team, convinced the Jira admin team are doing wrong, as much as Sylvia's saying here, and or will tell you how it is. And at this point, that is one reason I love these certificates. Like, really, you think you know more about Jira than me?
And this is the only reason I got dragged on here, so that I can have some credibility. All right. Again, yeah. Sylvie says our CEO doesn't care. Don't know Jira, and most of our users are happy with what they get. There will come a time, Sylvie. Give it enough time. Give it enough time. You will be taken down so far down a Jira team managed project rabbit hole. Just give it enough time. Got inherited the Jira admin role, and there are many team managed projects already in there, and they're all unique. Yep. See, we're not making this stuff up, folks.
Yeah, I remember when because they were first called Next Gen projects, but Atlassian will rebrand. That's something they're very good at and do often. And I remember when we first came out with Next Gen project, every admin was going, yeah, but how do you enforce consistency when everyone could do their own thing?
Yeah. And you cannot run a company when everybody speaks 20 different languages. And your Jira projects, your workflows and your processes and the things that we're going to cover in this ACP-620, that is a fundamental core to how do you execute, how do you run your business. Jira takes those business requirements and turns them into Jira speak, right? That these are the workflows that we're going to be creating. And when anybody can create a Jira project and not respect or cherish, that's the word I'm trying to say, the beauty of business requirements, then you create a very chaotic Jira. And Ronnie's staring at me like if I'm not even speaking English.
No, I'm just thinking recent example where someone was challenging a rather complex config, admittedly complex config I had to put together. And every time they'd ask, well, why is this complication here or this complication here, I could point to some requirement, like this is why we had to do it. This is the other options we considered, and this is why they would not work.
So this is interesting. If Sylvie's been in Jira since 2008, I don't think the cloud was around in 2008. So how in the world did you create this opportunity for all these team managed projects to be created then?
I don't think she created all the team managed projects in 2008.
No, I know.
The instance has been alive since 2008. It was migrated to the cloud, and they did not lock it down immediately. So yours went, ooh, shiny.
Yeah. All right. Well,
fair.
Yeah, fair, definitely fair. But again, for everybody else, we migrated last year to the cloud. So only within the last year. That's interesting then that your team, if your team's been around, your team's been using Jira since 2008, and they just got a taste of this freedom last year.
You have, even on data centers, on-prem, you have those people who are convinced they know more about Jira than the admin team. I've had one person nearly take down our Jira because they were so convinced they knew Jira better than our admin team. And that's how I finally got rid of their admin access.
I've been in those situations too, where somebody thinks that somebody's really smart and they think they can figure everything out, which is great. I'm all for it, but go make mistakes in somebody else's tool.
You're not the one getting yelled at when it's down.
Yep. All right. So discover and understand business requirements. Again, we're just building up the case as to why it's not a good idea to let your team run amok. So as you meet with your members of your team, you're going to want to focus on two goals. First, find out what users need to complete their work. This will help you determine how you configure Jira. And second, teach them about the capabilities of Jira so they understand how to use it. So find out what users need. So determine the various users' needs, consider long-term plans, prioritize those needs, get an agreement on those needs across teams. And then teaching users about Jira. Discuss the basic components of Jira, such as projects and work items. Encourage users to take the free Jira training and explain features that address needs as they arise, like work level security. Ooh.
That is...
Try to stay away from that one.
It is the most underrated feature, in my opinion.
It is, but it's also a complex feature that I try not to promote. unless absolutely needed.
Again, I think this next section is going to get to that point.
Yeah. Ask the right questions about to discover business requirements. Managers and leaders have different needs than end users. Asking the right questions will help you discover business requirements for each group and ultimately map them to Jira. So ask your managers and leaders, what's your organization mission? What are your business processes? Who needs access? What do you need to do? What types of things do you need to track and report? This, I feel, is one of the most critical things. But going back to Sylvie's comment up here of like our CEO doesn't care, this is usually where I find the most amount of resistance because I don't know about you, Rodney, but I'm often caught in this situation where like we're designing Jira, right? We're designing workflows. We're trying to figure out the issue types, cough, work types. We're trying to figure out the required fields, the custom fields, and then every executive is like, I just want to know what kind of reports I can get out of Jira, and I'm like, well, what do you want to see? They're like, why would you just want to know what you can give me? I'm like, well, what do you want to see? Because I can give you whatever you want, but I need to know what you want. But the answer that I always get is like, well, just give me what Jira can give me. And I'm like, well, you're going to be very disappointed with what Jira does naturally out of the box.
Yeah. This question right here, though, usually goes to one of my biggest points. And I hate this feature because it ends up being a headache for end users. Required fields.
Yeah.
I will only allow a required field if it's something you need to report on or it's something you need to track individually as a manager.
Yep. And
Otherwise, go ahead.
No, so I'm sure there's going to be a section on fields and required fields later. There has to be.
Yeah. That is the single biggest headache for your end users, though, is I'm trying to get a ticket in real quick, just something to get my out of my mind and onto the common source of truth. And I have to fill out all these miscellaneous fields, and
Yeah.
in some cases I have to go find them.
Yeah, I think this is where I usually remember I was talking about earlier up here. You do these three things. You discover the requirements, you map the requirements, and you implement in Jira. This is that case where their requirement is going to be, I want 20 required fields. You're going to implement set 20 required fields, and you're quickly going to find out we really only need 3.
I mean, I'm not going to rehash the story here. If you want to go see our previous study session, but sometimes you have to let the end users and the project admins figure out the pain for themselves.
Yeah. No, sometimes, yeah, because as an admin, one thing that I will tell you, kind of give you, not on the ACP, but definitely for your sanity, right? There's a good cop, bad cop type of scenario that you can play as the leader of Jira admins, right? And what you'll often find is that most folks don't appreciate the airbagging that we were discussing in a previous episode, right? Most people don't appreciate the wisdom that you have, especially when you're an employee. I think when you're like a consultant like you and me, Ronnie, I think we get a lot more respect as consultants, right? Like we come in and we're paid to be the experts. But when you're the employee of a company and you're the Jira admin of the company, your cautions, right? Your words of caution of like you don't make 20 fields required is going to most likely fall on deaf ears because the business doesn't care. They just want their 20 required fields. And so I'm of the opinion that it's better for you to just comply and give them those 20 required fields. And this is why I like to get teams into Jira as quickly as possible with the requirements as quickly as possible. Because once I built what they wanted, they're going to realize that's not what they needed. And then the fun begins because now we can negotiate, right? But now I can show and go, here's the cause and here's the effect, here's the pro, here's the con, try it. But when you're just in a whiteboard and you're just kind of writing down requirements, it's very challenging to contend, challenge. It's very challenging to challenge the requirement, and you're just often seen as the bad guy, right? You're just seen as the naysayer or the one that's getting in the way of progress. And so it's a balance you got to have to play as a Jira admin there.
The most powerful words is no but. First thing is tell them why you don't want to do it, what the consequences are, but then offer them a alternative that would work and still satisfy their requirement.
Yeah, but again, you do need to have a little bit more thicker skin though as a Jira admin. Sometimes it depends on the culture and of your team, right? I think every team's gonna be a little bit different, but just be aware of that when you're going through these questions. Again, not I don't think it's something I don't think it's something that the ACP would cover because I don't know how you test against this, but from an emotional perspective, like that meme of like emotional damage comes to play, right? Like coming up with the requirements for the right Jira project is a lot of emotional damage for Jira admins. Okay, what security do you need and what are the tools you need? And then you can ask your end users like what type of different tasks you perform typically. This is how I start figuring out my work item types, right? I try to figure out, okay, is stories and tasks enough and bugs, or do we need to introduce something like spikes? Do we need to introduce something like a risk, right? What are your processes for those tasks? How many of them share the same steps? How many of them are different? Because depending on that answer, I'm going to have shared workflows or I'm going to have unique workflows. Is work part of a larger process within the company, right? This is very good because there's hierarchies in Jira, right? And different issue types or work item types can be in one project but not be in another project. And you can get very creative with where you put different levels of work and the kind of workflows that they have. Where do you start and where do you hand off work to other people? This is great when you're talking about workflows, right? So the biggest complaint that I get from teams is we can't finish the work in our sprint. And usually the question is like, well, why? And they're like, well, because there's a whole QA portion that takes like forever. I'm like, well, and then why is QA part of your workflow? And they're like, oh, it's because we need it, right? So then we have a lot of negotiations because, again, many different ways to skin the cat there. Sylvie says another difficulty is when all the Jira admins in the team have not had the same opinions on things. Yeah, Sylvie, this is why you also want to have as minimal amount of cooks in the kitchen.
Too many chefs is definitely an issue. Another solution to this particular issue is for the major things: how to create a project, how to all this. You should have an SOP document within your team. If you have more than one admin doing the same task, you should have some sort of standardized process behind that task.
Yep.
But getting that standardized process and going through that negotiation is not easy. I am not in any way envious of that mountain of work that'd be ahead of you if you chose to go this, but it will make this particular problem a little easier.
Yep. How long does these tasks normally take? I think this is important because again, people have a false sense of reality of how complex their work is. What sort of data do you need to collect to perform these tasks? This is going back to those required fields. How can you tell when something is done? Boy, oh boy, can we just spend we could probably write like a 1 week long course on what is definition of done mean.
We've had discussions about this in the
Internally.
TJL. Yeah. Especially when someone decided they weren't going to get a passport.
That to me was done. I gave up. The task is complete.
And what was my response on the ticket?
You reopened it.
I reopened it with, "This does not meet our definition of done."
Oh man, yeah. Talk about opinions. If you think you have a lot of opinions on Jira administrative things, your
Me
team's
and
gonna have a lot
Alex
of them.
always. It seems like we always have the opposite opinion on any subject.
It doesn't matter what it is. Do you need to provide reports on your work? If so, which report? Yeah. So again, required fields or just custom fields. These are all gonna drive what I call the infrastructure and plumbing of Jira. So very good questions to have because all of these, depending on how you answer, impact the end result of your Jira.
I do want to make a point here with this section before we move on. Atlassian says something here. This is something I have often preached, and I have not seen a lot of people, even consultants, do. A Jira admin or project admin, because again, that's the main focus of this course, they'll take what they need from the project or what they need to do and what they need to look at, and they'll never consider the people who are actually going to use it, the team. If you are a consultant or project admin, you have to consult the team. What are your pain points? What do you need to get work done? All this. because if you do not, you're going to get garbage data in, which means you're going to get garbage data out.
I 100% agree.
We do agree on something.
Every once in a while, the stars align, or
Yeah.
in our case, the ducks may align. Okay. Pro tip here: document your findings in Confluence. You want to eat your own dog food, folks. Whenever possible, use the Atlassian tools to manage the Atlassian tools. All right. Again, you don't have to. Email, PowerPoints are great. I personally love, Rodney, I don't know how you feel about this one, but one of my personal passions is when we're creating these business requirements is to put it in a Confluence whiteboard. I love using Confluence whiteboards for documenting business requirements on what your Jira should look like.
Whiteboard is a great first step, but you should formalize that into a regular document, because every configuration change, I was harping on this earlier, every complication, because again, we want to keep these configurations as simple as possible. So every time we add a complication, be that another status or another transition or another transition with validators and conditions and post functions, any sort of complication, a new field, these are what I mean by complications. Anything that makes the project less simple, we need to map that to a requirement. Go, this is why we needed this.
Yep. All right. So mapping your requirements to Jira configuration. So once you have a solid understanding of your users' needs, you can begin mapping them to Jira. Remember, your goal is to build Jira right the first time. Reduce feature overhead.
I agree with this with an asterisk.
That is your goal. I think goals should be outlandish.
Goals, but we need to admit that a Jira configuration is a living thing that should change with your team and your organization.
Not too much though, but it's a living organism.
Yeah.
All right, so here's a few things to consider while you make your plan. So configure Jira to meet your business requirements and your users' needs. Make fields, transitions, statuses, and screens easy to understand and navigate. One thing that isn't...
Yeah, we have whole discussions on this point right here.
I think naming convention will take you a very, very long way. I can't tell you how many untrained Jira admins I worked with in the past where they call their screen like adding a custom field X. And then later they realize that they have to find the screen to put in the screen scheme. And then they call it like the name of their project. That's it. And now you don't know which one's the screen and which one's the screen scheme because you didn't put screen and screen scheme in the naming. And then you don't know which Jira project is supposed to go to because you didn't put the key in there. And
and then you got to figure out what issue type the screen scheme is supposed to go to for your issue type screen scheme.
Yep.
Which is a whole nother headache. And then what project goes to, and
names. Yeah. Naming
conventions will save so much headache.
Yeah. So much confusion, especially if you have short-term memory like I do, because you will forget.
I have goldfish memory. I'm not ashamed to admit. I don't write it down, it's gone.
Yeah, these things do not, like, Jira does not do a good job at giving it to us in sequence, where, like, like one thing feeds to the next, goes to the next. Like, you're out of sequence a lot of the time, so you forget something you did 10 minutes ago that you're going to need 10 minutes later.
I'm going to have to step away for a moment. I've got the hospital calling me twice.
You got it, boss.
That's never a good sign.
Never it is. Hopefully you're still alive by the time you come back. All right. So keeping your workflow simple, this we'll get into a lot. Setting your permissions to that balance security requirements with how your teams work. I would say permissions is a very big part of this. I think we're probably going to have a whole dedicated section just talking about permissions. But keep in mind that there are permissions to the project, which are managed by your Jira project permissions. And then there's work item level security. Permissions at the project level, I 100% support. We should always be very mindful and cautious of what we're doing there. When it comes time to work level security, in my opinion, these are edge cases. You don't want to go crazy with your work level security. You want to reserve that for very specific use cases, like you have external clients or you're dealing with like non-disclosure type of agreements, right? Very, very unique cases. But at the project level, the general philosophy is you want to get that project level security correct. But once you're in the project, you should have a lot more freedom. Using a project roles and schemes, this is going to be key so that you don't have to create 20 different unique permission schemes. One permission scheme can dominate everything when you use roles. So we'll talk about that later. Try to configure only a few schemes and reuse them across many projects. Again, really only possible. Folks, also, when you see the word scheme, this is only possible in company managed projects. So again, not if you're on a team managed project, none of this is going to matter for you then because there's no schemes there. And then automate as much as possible. I think this should come with a very big asterisk as well, because automation is great until it's not. And if you've done some automations in the past, I'll give you a great example. I have a client that I've been working with on automating some stuff. And just last night, I got an email saying, like, I don't think the automation is working. And I'm like, let me look into it. And I looked into it. I'm like, nope, the automation is working as we designed it. And they're like, well, it's happening too often. And I'm like, well, that's what happens when you automate things. You take the human element out of the loop, and now you're leaving it up to some logic that you define to do the work for you. So automate as much as possible, but be very cautious. All right. So implementing your Jira configuration. So once you've discovered your business requirements and you've mapped them to Jira, it's time to actually implement them in Jira. So keep these best practices in mind. So don't over-engineer it. Avoid complex configurations to help make your site easy to use. As Ronnie stated earlier, if you're making 20 required fields, then your team is most likely not going to have all the information to fill out all 20 required fields. Guess what's going to happen? Your team is not going to want to use Jira. This is not a great way to drive adoption of the tools. So start simple, start intuitive, start easy so that your team warms up to the use of Jira. Keep your users' needs top of mind to implement Jira. Consult your notes often to ensure the configurations are meeting those business requirements. You ultimately want to keep your end users happy. And so make sure you're building to what they want. You're still alive? Oh, you're still on mute. And you're still on mute. I don't know what you did, but you messed up all your... There you go.
Double mute. Yeah. I'm still live. I've got some testing coming up to make sure the surgery I had back in February did its job. And apparently the left hand wasn't talking to the right. If only they had a good system like Jira to go, oh, that patient's already been contacted.
Just tell them I'm going to go to Europe in October, and that's going to be the ultimate test. If I come back in a casket, well, you guys failed.
I mean, ultimately, yes, but we'll see.
I hope I don't have to bring you back in a casket. So let's go get those tests done.
I was much worse off in October, and I still managed to come back. It's going to take a lot more than that. I'm just too stubborn.
We'll just have to pull a Valerie and just stick you in the wrong train and send you in a train to nowhere.
I mean, I still got where I need to go.
I'm freaking out, dude. I don't even know if I'm going to Barcelona at this point.
You can. You should. You absolutely
I can read
should.
the signs, so that should be good.
I managed. I don't speak Spanish, so you know.
That's what gives me a lot of hope. I'm like, Rodney managed to survive Barcelona. I should be fine. All right. Users will be more likely to use the site if it's easy to understand and navigate. Consider their daily tasks. You know what's one of the pro tips that I tell people is, like, I think that your work page in Jira is drastically underrated, where a lot of people spend so much time like creating the perfect workflow, creating the perfect this, the perfect that. And I'm like, as long as you assign work to people, there's one place in Jira that individual needs to go to and see everything that's relevant to them. And you don't have to worry about everything else. And Atlassian's going to make the your work app work so much better with the new introduction of the home app, where all of your work, regardless of where you're at, as long as somebody's depending on you for something, it's going to be all in one place. So take advantage of that.
I will say this, another thing to consider, and I obsess over this. I think, Alex, you may obsess over it more than I do. Click count. How many times a user has to click to get a given task done?
Yep. Like hit and record on StreamYard.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make things easy. You want to make things intuitive. I get required fields. I get that there's a balance between like, hey, well, we need data, right? We need data to make a decision. But there's different ways to make fields required. There's a way to do it required upon inception where you might know things like the title, but you might not know the due date. You might not know the priority right away, right? You might not know certain things right away. But through the use of workflows, you can then make fields required later in life. And so I think that's very critical that, again, I don't think a lot of people know or can appreciate.
Mm-mm.
All right, so how do we balance our user and admin access? So consider how much control admins have on your Jira site. For example, a site with less admin control gives users more power to do their work. However, the site might be more difficult to maintain. Weigh the benefits of each option. So if you have less admin control, you're going to get up and running fast. It's going to give power to a lot of people. People can quickly do their own work without bottlenecks, and each project has their own schemes. Good for smaller sites with autonomous teams, 10 user instance.
I swear Atlassian stole this from thejiraguy.com.
That would be funny. But notice 10 users. The moment you're over 10, you're going to want to do this one. Actually, it's funny. They skip anywhere between 11 and 999. What do you do if you're between more than 11 users and less than 1,000?
It's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum. So you want more admin control. If initially more administrative work, but it's easier to maintain, more security. It's going to frustrate the users, right? If you have bad admins, and you're going to have shared schemes and better performance in large sites. I think, again, like Rodney said, spectrum is the right word. Balance, dichotomy, I think are the right words. You will not be able to please everybody, and you're going to have to make a call. I will caution you, as the great late Uncle Ben once said, with great power comes great responsibility. When you give too much power to the people, expect a revolution.
I mean, yes, but in companies where the whole culture is move fast and break things, that might be the way to go. Yes, you'll pull your hair out as the Jira admin, but that is the company culture. You just got to accept a certain amount of that and fix what you have to.
And it is a really big mindset, right? And what I would do, here's my 2 cents, because I've been in that situation. I managed a Jira where the team lead was gun-ho. We're Silicon Valley tech company. We are gonna fail fast, break everything, make a mess out of everything in the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say if you're a Jira admin that's a little bit more conservative, you're gonna have a miserable time.
Yes.
Miserable. And the words of, if you can't beat them, join them. I can't echo them enough here, because you will have a much better time if you partner with these fast folks, and you should work at their speed so that you still regain control. Because all these things up here of like get up and running fast, give people power, people can do the work without the bottlenecks. Don't be the bottleneck. Work as fast as they do, right? Innovate with them. And if you shift your mindset to do that, you'll still have the power at the end of the day, and you're not the bottleneck, and you will be seen as a worthy teammate, as opposed to just a Jira admin that said no to them. And because that's what I do. So I'm speaking from personal experience here.
I mean, I could agree with it.
Positions you in a better spot to have greater influence in the future, because then you'll earn their respect. And once they want to do something outlandish, you can go, wait, hold up, this doesn't feel right. But they've earned your respect at that point. And so now they're going to be more open to pushbacks later. But at the beginning, you gotta run with them. It's my experience. All right. So let's see what we've learned. This is, again, the best part of this whole thing. So which of the following is not? And this is, again, when you're taking the test, folks, you want to be watching out for this. Which is not? Right? It's very easy to skip over the big bold letters when you're in the heat of the moment. So which of the following is not a best practice for discovering business requirements? So one of these is not like the others. Find out what users need to complete the work. That seems like one. Teach users about their capabilities of Jira. That seems like one. Get agreements on users' needs across the teams, and build Jira with more admin control. So I think this is the right answer, but I'm going to take this as a learning opportunity. And this is something you should be careful when you're taking the test. As you see here, I tend to like highlight and click on my as I'm reading through the questions. The test, if I remember correctly, will follow something very closely. So if you're clicking, that's your answer. So if you're just clicking for the sake of clicking to kind of help you read like I do, be very careful that when you hit the submit button, you're clicking on the right one. You ultimately want to hit the right answer because it is very sensitive, right? And so if you went back up and clicked on something else, you might accidentally submit the wrong answer, even though you know the right answer, but you clicked in the wrong spot.
I usually try and make sure I have enough time to go through the questions one more time. Even the questions I'm confident in, I'll go through and make sure I clicked what I intended to.
Yeah, because I've caught myself at least 3 or 4 questions during the last 2 ACPs where I did that, where I was like, wait, why is this the answer? This is not the answer at all. But it's one of those things where I the way I read with the mouse is like I tend to highlight the text as I'm reading, and then as I'm doing the question, I'm highlighting too, but that starts clicking into the answer. So be very, very careful if you have that bad habit like me. All right, so Liam's implementing configuration in Jira. His company has 1,500 people, so building a secure site is very important to him. How much admin control should Liam build into his site? More admin control. There you go. Yay, next lesson. All right, compare company and... Where's Sylvia? Are you still on? All right, so what's the difference between team and company managed projects? So there's a project type you can use in Jira that determines how different users can administer the project. It also determines which features and behaviors are available. Team managed projects provide the team with more independence in setting up workflows, permissions, fields, and other settings. They enable you to move quickly as they aren't very complex, and your configurations only impact your project. Company, on the other hand, or AKA the traditional, AKA data center projects, share highly customizable configurations with other projects. These shared configurations are called schemes, allow greater flexibility than the settings available in team managed projects, and only Jira admins can create company managed projects and implement many of the configurations. So project admins need to collaborate closely with their Jira admin. And that right here is where you drive a nail in through your head because you have to work with somebody to make the company managed work. And team managed, everybody's kind of like their own admin.
And Alex, to promo other videos on the channel, asked the licensed CEO why team managed projects even exist. And if you want to find out the logic behind it, you definitely need to go check out that video.
Yeah. So we definitely asked why team managed projects exist. I think the intention is great, but we're still failing on the execution. The team managed...
That's what Mike said too.
Spoiler, they're not gonna go see it. All right. And then for Rosario, yeah, those were both the last ones. So Rosario's been following along with the answer. So yeah, you got them both right. Yay. Okay, so team managed projects can create and assign roles. They can also configure restrictions for different roles. You can configure your own work types, fields, screens, workflows, and notifications. Though fewer options are available than in company managed projects, and you don't need to be a Jira admin to configure these settings. You can only have one board in the team managed project. The boards can only display work from that project, not others. There are also fewer apps and reports available. I like to call the team managed project the handicap version of Jira. Shara says, unrelated, but what I've always wondered is if a company has access to Jira, why would anyone use Trello? We wonder the same question as well.
Careful. This is how we summon Brittany.
I've wondered, see, if I ever get a chance to sit down with Mike again, the next question is going to be, why is Trello still a thing?
I am convinced Trello has its place in project management.
I'd love to hear that convinced argument.
We can make it a special debate.
We should have a more roll up your sleeves. Why does Trello exist with Brittany? Like, I get Trello, like I get its place in the world, but not in the business.
Lena, don't summon Brittany. Please don't.
Trello. I used to work in a team where I wouldn't pay attention to meetings unless somebody said Jira. So they knew that if they wanted my attention, they'd have to say Jira.
Oh, I've done one worse. I've set up a alert filter in Slack. So if anyone in any channel I was monitoring mentioned the word Jira or Confluence, it would ping me.
Ronnie shows up like the genie.
Yes, actually, that's how I became known in company-wide as the Jira expert, because I just show up.
You're the
Oh,
Jira
here's your
genie.
answer.
Ask and thou shalt receive. All right. So company managed projects have schemes, which, according to Mike Cannon Brooks, CEO of Atlassian and co-founder of Atlassian, says, and I quote, "When you master schemes, it's like being, was it? Shoot,
Neo
I
in the
should have quoted.
Matrix.
Yeah, there we go. It's like in the Matrix, right? Like you know the secret to life. You figured it all out. All right, so schemes control almost every feature, behavior in the company managed projects, including your user permissions, notifications, work types, work item fields, screens, and workflows. Jira admins can use the same schemes across multiple company managed projects. This is right here key. This is why we love company managed projects. And then they support multiple boards with more complex filters, including work for multiple projects. This is another reason why we love company managed projects. So I always tell people, folks, if you're going to be paying for the Ferrari, use the Ferrari, because it doesn't make sense to pay the Ferrari price because Jira is not cheap, right? It doesn't make sense to pay for Ferrari level performance, but drive it like a Corolla. It just doesn't make any sense. Like you can, awesome, like, but why? Like, why would you pay $300,000 for a Corolla?
I mean,
It
you
doesn't
have to
make
drive it like a Corolla till you get it to the track, so you can drive it like a Ferrari.
no. You drive the Ferrari like a Ferrari all the time.
And
Okay.
this, how many tickets do you have, Alex?
It's LA. You can't even go anywhere, anyways. This top speed is like 5. Although you should watch the barbecue video. Did you catch it, Ronnie, in the behind the scenes on the barbecue when we went to Costco?
I did.
Poor Bob he was holding on to dear life. He did not like my driving in a Tesla. We had to switch to my more conservative car on future trips, or Bob was driving. All right. Determine the project type. You can see the project type for any project by clicking more actions next to its name in the sidebar. This is very true, folks. This is new and improved for the new Jira 2.0. You can also select the project type. You can also see the project type on the all projects page, which is very hard to get to nowadays, by the way, because it's all the way down there. And if you have 50 projects, it's all the way at the bottom. This new UI scales very oddly in the new UI. But this is where you find out. And this little button right here is what you're looking for, which is not immediately obvious to you, especially with muscle memory.
Yeah, I find myself going to the board and then like, oh wait, I have to go up to the project and click and get to.
Yeah. Damn it, Atlassian. I'm gonna get you back one day, Mike. All right. So the same kinds of people are project admins for company managed projects and team managed projects. Think product managers, people managers, team leads, scrum leads, and more. The roles are very different. So team managed project admins can configure everything without having to coordinate with your Jira admin. This includes notifications, automations, right? All the settings. There are just a few available. There are fewer available configurations compared to a team managed, company managed. And in the company ones, you can basically configure everything, except project admins can't do anything. Well, so while you have the power, you have the ability to do everything, you need to have the right permission. So a project admin literally is not going to be able to do a whole lot. In fact, the only things that a project admin will be able to do is like change the name of the project. That's kind of it. Okay. To be a project admin for either team or company managed projects, you need to have the administrator role for that project. This is both very, very true. Notice that I think Atlassian really kind of messed us up with this one too, right? But there is an administration role or administrator role built into the permissions of both team and company managed projects, and you have to have that role and that permission to then be a project admin. The easiest way, folks, for you to know though if you are a project admin or not is when you click on the little ellipses and you see project settings, you have the right power. If you don't see project settings, sorry.
I have seen some companies attempt a custom permission scheme or forget to assign administrator projects to the administrator role. And that causes no end of headaches when you're trying to learn a new Jira instance when they've done this.
Yep. All right. So Isla uses a team managed project. She wants to use a workflow from another project. True or false? She can use the same scheme. That is going to be a big negative. There are no schemes in these team managed projects. Next question. Wei isn't sure if his project is team or company. What's the easiest way for him to find his information? Contact his Jira admin. That submit a ticket. I love that one. Find the project in the search bar. No, this will tell you what type it is, right? This will tell. Well, actually, no. This used to do it, right? Well, in the search bar, it won't tell you. In the all projects, it'll tell you, right? So it used to. But this is the right answer. You want to click the more actions, the three dots next to the project name in the sidebar.
I will say, approaching 620, it's going to be hard, given my experience as a Jira admin, not to put submit a ticket to your Jira admin on every answer that has it.
You should just.
Well, that is what my project admins do all the freaking time.
Marco wants to create a board with work for multiple projects. Which project type should he use? It has to be company, because a board in a team managed project can only see that particular project.
Correct.
All right, next lesson. Oh, and this is the long one. We have 9 minutes to finish a 10-minute thing, and we took us 50 minutes to do 2 5-minute ones.
We ain't making it, man. We ain't making it.
It ain't looking good for us. All right, what's a project template? So Jira offers many pre-configured project templates that enable you to quickly meet the needs of your team. These templates have already configured your work items, workflows, and other features intended for different use cases. And there are templates for software, business, service, product, projects. Project templates also exist for different areas like product management, design, and so on. So basically, when you hit the create project, you will see all of this on the left with all the different templates that are available.
Do you remember what started these Jira templates?
No.
Jira Work Management.
Oh, right. Oh, Jira.
Yeah, this was something I'm not going to say I'm the one who recommended, because I'm not sure if I was the only voice recommended. I was one of the people recommending this to Atlassian for Jira Work Management. That much I know for sure. So I'd have some smart play with project templates being a thing.
Should we have a moment of silence in the honor of Jira Work Management?
Sure.
Okay.
That being said, just Jira is so much better.
Yeah. You served us well, Jira. And she lives on, right? Like all of these still are there. They just don't get acknowledged as a separate product. They're just now templates within Jira.
Yes.
Before they used to be their own product. All right. So explore available project templates. So project templates and project types are separate. So you can choose many combinations. So for example, you can have a company managed or team managed project that uses Scrum or Kanban. And remember from last week or last session, there are differences, fundamental differences in these. However, some templates may only be available for one project type. So for example, like the Jira product discovery templates are only team managed and only product discovery. Both the project template and the type will impact your configurations. Project templates provide pre-configurations. The project type determines how you can configure your project. Team managed projects offer fewer configurations but more control over them for users who aren't Jira product admins. Company managed projects are much more customizable, but only Jira admins can create them as they share the configurations called schemes. Software project templates. For software projects, there are 4 commonly used templates: Kanban, Scrum, bug tracking, and top-level planning. Really, there's only 2. There's Kanban and there's Scrum. And I think we beat these both to death last time, so I'm not going to spend too much time on these. But just know that if you want to sprint, you have to use Scrum. If you don't care, then you can use Kanban. That leaves us with bug tracking. I have never in my 8-9 years of being a Jira admin have I ever used a bug tracking template. I don't see the value in it.
I've used it
once
in a similar situation where I've used like a Jira Core project, which again, rip Jira Core, but it definitely needed to go. But the use case there is I used it as a basis to then customize into something else I actually wanted. And this is the point where I was going to Atlassian, look, give us project templates that get us 90% of the way there. Let us customize the last 10% for our teams.
Yep. All right. Again, I don't care for it. Top level, this is even worse because this doesn't even create a project, but rather creates a plan. So not helpful either. I tend to stay away from this one as well.
Yeah.
All right. So again, really, you only have Scrum or Kanban when it comes to software. I would avoid bug tracking and top level planning like the plague.
Again, bug tracking, only way I find it useful is if I'm using it as a starting point for something entirely custom.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll get to that. We'll get into that here because business project templates, right? This is where you have HR, marketing, finance, design, legal, and sales. Couple of things that I'll say here. I'm going to tell you this, and I'll repeat it for the people in the back. 9 times out of 10, 95% of the time, I will pick the blank business template. I'd rather have a blank slate than to have predetermined options for me. Because I'm going to modify the workflow anyways. I'm going to modify the issue types. I'm going to modify the whole thing. And none of these, in my opinion, have ever provided me with any real value that I'm like, oh, I want to keep that. Every team, when it comes to HR and all that, has been so unique to me that none of these like templates that are there are helpful. Especially knowing that they also create new issue types as well for you. And they create new statuses in your workflow or in your pool of statuses.
As I said, I had my role to play in templates existing. I'm going to own that. But what I actually described to Atlassian is very different from what we ended up getting.
Yeah, and then we have service projects. So there's really only 2 that I tend to use. There's the ITSM one. I would not use this one unless you're really, really 100% gonna do ITSM and you are committed to it. So you have incidents, you have changes, you have all of it. You're using all of it. But I would say this is an edge case. I see very, very few teams that can really benefit from using all the features of JSM. I 90% of the time just go with the generic one or the general one. This to me gives me an emptier slate to then innovate on, because this one here comes with way too many predetermined options.
That third one seems interesting considering Team 25.
Well, the third and fourth one do, considering Team 25.
Yeah.
So these right here are going to be broken down to their own. And so these will go away, and it sounds like they're going to be like their own, I would assume their own entry up here. I would assume. But we don't know enough yet. Create a Jira project from a template. So most of the time you'll want to create projects from a template. However, you can also select blank project and create a project without pre-configurations. You can create both blank projects and template projects in the same place. So this is what I'm saying. Like, I think in my opinion, it's so much easier to just start with a blank project because you're going to customize the heck out of everything anyways. But you create a project, you browse the templates if you want one, and then you pick there's literally a blank one. Then you name it, you give it the key, you pick the team type. This has been
our last study session about picking an appropriate key.
Yes.
We went into detail about that.
Yep. Then you pick your team type, you pick your access level, and then if you're on company managed project, you'll see this one here. And this basically takes the workflows and the fields and all the configurations from a different company managed project and applies it to this one. And then, so that's it. So let's see what we learned. So Sad wants to create a project with his developer team, which delivers work in 2-week increments. Which project? Well, that's easy. That's Scrum.
2-week increments was the keyword there.
Yep. That's also another thing. Don't get cocky during the test. Do not get cocky during the test and read half the question. Read the full question. It's very easy to get cocky when you've been doing this for a long time and then miss the question because you got cocky at the beginning. Sigma IT Solutions, an IT service company, wants a service project to help them manage incidents, changes, and service requests. They also want a template that is pre-configured for ITSM. So this is the ITSM one. Okay. And then true or false, a project template determines who can configure your project, whether your configuration are shared with other projects. Not really.
I'm pretty sure this is false.
Because I mean, this is part of the project creation process, but it's not at the template level. Because after you pick the template, then you pick if it's team or company, and that's where this would apply. So I think it's false. Yay. Okay. So next lesson. So here's what we're gonna do. We got one more section here about scheme. So we'll pick this back up on Tuesday, and hopefully it doesn't take us 50 minutes to do it. And then yeah. So again, special shout out to our sponsor, Revyz, for making this episode possible. Make sure you check out Revyz. And if you need backup solutions for your Jira, like if your team has ever deleted an issue and you're like, uh-oh, how do I bring that back? Well, you wish you would have had a backup. And so Revyz is there to back up your data, backs up your configuration. So if you're going from your sandbox to production environment, Revyz will help you move all your configurations in one sweep, which is better than doing it manually. And so there's quite a few different use cases. So definitely check out Revyz. And again, special shout out to the Revyz team for making all of this possible for us. Anything you want to add, Ronnie?
Nope. We'll see you guys on Tuesday.
See you Tuesday. Bye.